Dilly's heart raced in her chest, and for the first time in so long, the secret she had been holding inside was on the verge of spilling out. The words she had been hiding for years were just about to escape. With Ashton sitting in front of her, giving her all of himself, she knew there was no turning back once she said them. "I don't know what to say, Ashton," she whispered, swiping at her wet eyes. "Say that you want me to," he urged softly, his hands cupping her face. "Say that you want to stay here with me. Please, Dilly. I need to hear it." His words were filled with so much raw vulnerability that she couldn't help but respond. The air in the room felt heavy with their nervous energy, but his expression was so sincere, so full of love, that she felt herself being drawn into it. "Ashton Patterson's," she said through a broken, laughing sob. "I've never once left you hanging." "You know that?" He swallowed hard, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "So, what do you say?" Dilly gazed into his eyes, her hands gently brushing through his hair. And then, finally, the words she had been holding back for so long escaped her. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank God," he murmured with a sigh of relief. His arms enveloped her in a tight hug, and he pressed his face into her neck. His lips grazed her ear as he whispered, "Babe, what took you so long?" "I've been dying to hear you say that." She smiled through her tears, a sense of peace flooding her as he pulled back to kiss her softly on the lips. It was a kiss full of tenderness, something she hadn't even realized she had been longing for. But as their lips met, she knew that everything had changed. Ashton gently pushed her back onto the bed, and for the first time, Dilly didn't feel scared or uncertain about what was happening. She wanted this. She wanted him. And now, there was nothing between them. No walls, no hesitation. "I need you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She felt the same way, her hands tracing over his chest, pulling him closer, desperate for the connection that had always been there, but had never been fully realized. The weight of their unspoken words and unexpressed desires finally seemed to come together, and Dilly let herself fall into him completely. This wasn't just about passion, it was about everything they had kept inside for far too long. Ashton's movements were slow, deliberate, savoring every moment. The way he touched her, the way he kissed her, felt different now that everything had come to light between them. Their bodies moved together with a tenderness that matched the depth of their emotions. Dilly pulled him closer, feeling the intensity of their connection, and finally, she allowed herself to give in, to let go of all the doubt and uncertainty she had held onto for so long. With Ashton, there was no fear, just love. As they finally gave in to the moment, Dilly knew this was only the beginning of something deeper. Something she had always wanted but had been too afraid to admit. And now that they were here, she couldn't imagine ever letting go. Ashton had finally come to her in the way she had always dreamed of. And for once, she didn't have to hide her feelings. He loved her. She loved him. And nothing could change that now. Ashton couldn't believe how perfect everything felt in this moment. He had Dilly in his arms, her warmth pressed against his chest, and her eyes locked with his in a silent exchange that said everything. The air between them felt charged, but there was also something calming about it. In her presence, Ashton could feel a sense of peace he had never known before. His heart raced, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide it. He wanted her to see how much she meant to him, how much he had realized just how important she was in his life. He leaned down to kiss her, slow and gentle at first, savoring the way her lips felt against his. His hands shook, barely noticeable, as if he still couldn't believe this was really happening. But when Dilly kissed him back, Ashton's doubts faded away. Everything felt right in this instant. Her hands gently traced his chest, and he could feel the softness of her touch. Her words, when she spoke, were soft and filled with emotion. "Ashton," she whispered between their kisses, "you're everything to me." Her eyes searched his face, and she smiled slightly, the kind of smile that made him feel like the luckiest man alive. He wanted to say so much, but words couldn't seem to do it justice. He wasn't sure how to express what he was feeling, but he had to try. "You don't know how much I mean that," he said, his voice hushed, full of sincerity. "I love you, Dilly. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. I don't know how I got so lucky, but I'm not letting go." Her expression softened as she looked up at him. She said nothing for a moment, but Ashton didn't need her to. The way she held him, the way she leaned into him, it spoke volumes. She understood. And she felt it too. As they lay together, Dilly resting her head on his chest, Ashton could hear the steady rhythm of her breathing. Calming and steady. He wanted to stay like this forever, wrapped up in the quiet comfort of being with her. She ran her fingers lazily across his skin, as though she were memorizing every part of him, just as he was doing the same. "Dilly," he whispered again, more to himself than to her. "I'm not afraid anymore. Not of this. Not of you." Her eyes met his once more, and he could see the same vulnerability in her eyes that he felt in his heart. It was strange, but in the best possible way. They had both been afraid of what they might feel, of what might happen if they let go. But now there was no fear. Only certainty. "I'm not afraid either," she replied quietly, her voice filled with a soft confidence that made Ashton smile. "We're here. Together. And I think we always were, even when we didn't know it." He wrapped his arms tighter around her, pulling her closer. There was something about this moment, something so simple yet profound, that made him feel like he had everything he ever needed. It wasn't just love. It was understanding. It was a connection that ran deeper than either of them could put into words. "I love you," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His voice was soft but filled with the weight of everything he had wanted to say. "I love you too," she answered, her voice barely more than a whisper, but to Ashton, it was everything. He could hear the truth in her words, the sincerity, and that was enough. They kissed again, slower this time, with no urgency, no rush, just a quiet, lingering connection. It was everything he had ever wanted, everything he didn't know he needed. As they pulled away, they both smiled softly, the weight of everything they'd just said, settling between them like a quiet promise. "Let's never be afraid again," Daly said, her eyes sparkling with something new, something he hadn't seen in her before. Ashton nodded, his heart full. No more fear. Just us. Always. As the night stretched on, the world outside faded away, and all that remained was the two of them, wrapped in each other's arms. There were no more questions, no more wondering. This was where they belonged. With each other. And as Ashton held her, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his, he knew one thing for certain: he would never let her go. No matter what. 6 months later, Ashton stood outside a cozy restaurant, his gaze fixed on Delay as she walked toward him, her smile brighter than the sun itself. There was something about the way she carried herself graceful, yet confident, that made Ashton's heart skip a beat every time he saw her. She was wearing that red dress that always drove him crazy. "Damn, you look good," he muttered, his voice low as she twirled in front of him. Her smile grew wider, and before he could say anything else, she collapsed into his chest, nuzzling against him as he placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. Delhi intertwined her fingers with his, her grip firm but warm. "Let's go," she replied, her voice soft but full of excitement. They walked into the restaurant hand in hand, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling steaks filling the air. At the back of the restaurant, in a booth tucked in the corner, Sebastian and Raphael were already waiting. They both lit up when they saw the couple approaching, relief and happiness evident in their expressions. It had been months since Ashton and Delhi had officially made their relationship public, and there was something undeniably satisfying about seeing their friends so happy for them. "Hey! Here they are," Sebastian greeted them, tipping his glass in a mock salute. Raphael, ever the jokester, grinned and raised his glass. Cheers to the happy couple. As they slid into the booth, Delhi nestled against Ashton's side, her body melting into his, as though they were two pieces of a puzzle that fit together perfectly. "After all these months, when will that stop being a celebratory thing?" Delhi asked, laughing as she glanced between her friends. "Maybe when you get your PhD and there's something else to celebrate," Ashton teased, brushing his lips against her cheek. "This was 12 years in the making," Sebastian chimed in, leaning back in his seat with a playful glint in his eye. "So we might be celebrating it for another 12 years. "Fine by me," Ashton said with a grin, though privately he was celebrating every single day they were together. Not that he'd admit that out loud. Raphael, ever the voice of frustration, groaned and took a shot. "The only thing I've got to cheers to is how Dad won't stop riding my ass," he grumbled. "He keeps telling me I need to settle down. And now with you two all lovey-dovey, it's not helping my case." Ashton chuckled, glancing at his brother. "It's not my fault. I didn't force you to go public." Sebastian nodded. "Yeah, and your dad asked me to talk some sense into you too. I told him you were just sowing your wild oats. You'd get it out of your system eventually." Ashton raised an eyebrow, a teasing smirk playing on his lips. "Well, you do have to admit you've been sowing those wild oats for quite some time now." Raphael shot him a glare. "Oh, shut up." Delhi, ever the voice of reason, jumped in. "Raphael, you don't have to settle down to grow up. Look at your brother. He still goes on his adrenaline-fueled adventures and has a blast, but he also enjoys the quieter moments with me at home. Yeah, Ashton added, his voice warm as he spoke about the life they were building. It's nice to have that balance. Sebastian leaned in, his eyes narrowing. You're right, Raphael. Your dad did take a big chance giving you that COO position. You can't blame him for worrying. Yeah, Raphael muttered, swirling the contents of his glass. I'll try to take a lesson from my neighbor. She's the definition of uptight. His eyes gleamed mischievously. Actually, Sebastian, I think you two would get along. She's hot, banging body. If she wasn't so much of a goody two-shoes, I'd— Shut the hell up, Sebastian interrupted, a slight flush creeping up his neck. The rest of the table burst into laughter. Sebastian, always the meticulous one, wasn't one for casual flirtation or impromptu adventures. You know, Raphael continued, oblivious to the fact that his teasing had caused Sebastian's discomfort. If you're not gonna make a move, you might as well hook me up with her. Ashton and Sebastian exchanged looks, a shared moment of amusement passing between them. I'll leave you two to sort that out, Deli said, playfully nudging Ashton as she stood up. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Deli's best friend, Zoe, entered with a big smile on her face. Deli immediately bounced up from the booth, meeting her with a hug that was almost as bright as her smile. Here she is, Deli called out as the group looked on. Ashton rose to greet Zoe, knowing that this moment was significant for both him and Deli. He had met Zoe a few times before, but never formally as Deli's boyfriend. Zoe eyed him with an almost protective scrutiny, her arms crossed over her chest. So, you're the guy who's been stealing my best friend away for months? She asked, her voice teasing, but with an underlying sense of seriousness. Hey, we had our honeymoon phase, Deli replied with a playful shove. But look at us now. We're officially out in public. And slowly but surely, we're acclimating back into the outside world, Ashton added, grinning as he pulled Zoe into a warm hug. I promise I'll share her back with you from time to time, Ashton said, chuckling at the exchange. Zoe raised an eyebrow. You better. Oh, and I've got that measuring tape, Deli. Don't think I forgot. Deli's face turned bright red as she gasped in mock horror. Zoe. What? Zoe shrugged innocently, but the mischievous grin didn't leave her face. It's a normal thing. Ask Ashton. I'm sure he'd let you lead him to the restroom for a— Well, yes, I would, Ashton interrupted with a smirk, his eyes twinkling with amusement. See? I told you he was a prince, Zoe teased, before pulling a small blue measuring tape out of her clutch. Here, Ashton. This is for later. The room burst into laughter, but Deli's face only turned redder as she buried her face in her hands. Oh my God, Deli muttered, mortified. Raphael, who had overheard the conversation, grinned mischievously. She's not wrong. What do you have to hide, bro? Sebastian, who had been quietly observing, sat there with his mouth agape, clearly trying to process the hilarity of the situation. Not a damn thing, Ashton said, standing up to head toward the restroom. Deli tugged on his arm, whispering urgently, not here. Later. Ashton looked at Zoe with a teasing grin. You heard the lady, Zoe. It'll have to wait. Zoe pouted dramatically, but then winked. Fine. But Deli, you'd better call me tomorrow. Ashton's game. Dear God, Deli muttered. What have I done to deserve this? Zoe pulled Deli's hands down from her face. Well, you found me outside that coffee shop, and the rest was history. Now you're stuck with me as your best friend forever. Deal with it. Deli rolled her eyes, but couldn't help but snicker. The evening continued with laughter, drinks, and light-hearted conversation. But as the night wore on, the promise of what awaited them back home pulled Ashton and Deli away. Later that evening, when they arrived home, Ashton pulled Deli close, his heart pounding with excitement. Despite everything they had shared, he still couldn't get enough of her. They had shared intimate moments, but this felt different, more electric, more meaningful. What should we do with the rest of the night? Deli asked, her voice a little breathless as she removed her earrings. A movie? Some junk food? Or maybe we could just go straight to bed? The last option does sound pretty appealing, Ashton teased, his voice low as he pulled her close. But I have a better idea. How about you go change into something more comfortable and meet me in the living room? Deli raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Ashton, you know I don't like surprises. Trust me, he said, giving her a playful smack on the ass as she walked away. While she changed, Ashton quickly set up the living room with pillows and a bottle of tequila, placing a playlist full of their favorite songs from high school on the speaker. He sat cross-legged on the floor, waiting eagerly for Dealey to join him. When she returned, her eyes widened in amusement. "What's all this?" "I'd like to propose another game of truth or dare," Ashton said, handing her the bottle. "But without the dares." Dealey took a swig from the bottle and raised an eyebrow. "Oh, boy." "First question is yours," Ashton said, grinning mischievously. After a brief pause, Dealey looked at him thoughtfully. "Okay, I have a question for you. When did you know?" "Know what?" Ashton asked, confused. "That you loved me," she said, her voice soft, her cheeks turning a delicate shade of pink. Ashton smirked, his gaze softening. That's a tricky one. It happened in phases. But if I had to pinpoint it, I'd say I fell in love with you the first time I saw you sitting in the principal's office." Dealey scoffed playfully and smacked him on the leg. "Liar." Ashton laughed. "Okay, maybe it was when I wanted to punch Amber Collins for bumping into you. But if I'm being honest, I knew I loved you the moment I saw you crying on the steps of the school building. I remember it so clearly. But there was also the night we danced in your bedroom. And pretty much every time I saw you after that." Dealey smiled, her heart swelling as the two of them shared this quiet, intimate moment. But there was something else lingering in the air. Something unspoken but understood. After a long pause, Ashton finally asked, "Do you still think we're soulmates?" Dealey smiled softly. "More than ever." Ashton's gaze softened, his eyes shining with sincerity. "I believe I could be the best thing for you because you are for me.